Alright, welcome to the channel. I'm SmileyFaceX and we're back at it again doing some more Broken Arrow content. The last Broken Arrow video I put out, I was talking about the best units that the US has to offer, and the follow-up to that is this one here, which is the best units that Russia has to offer. So, the way this is going to work is we're going to quickly talk about the differences in general between the US and Russia, and then we're going to get into each of the category of units, and give you the best and the second best and any honorable mentions within that category. If you're not sure how to use any of the categories, make sure you check out my other videos, which I'll put in the description, so you know where to place them and how to kind of get the most out of them. Anyway, let's get into it. So firstly, between the US and Russia. In general, the US are more specialized, while Russia have more multi-purpose units. What this leads to is the US unit in the right scenario is much better than the Russian one. However, the Russian one can handle a lot more situations, a bit more flexible. Russia also have disposable troops, which is a new category that we brought in to the infantry space. However, they lack high altitude drones. So we've taken that category out because it's not very fair. They only have one high altitude drone. Russia have tankier helicopters as well. They're not quite as lethal as the US counterparts. However, they have 30 armor instead of the 20 armor that the US get. The Russian SHORADs have longer range than the US counterparts. However, they're much more fragile. So they really need to make sure they're using that range to stay out of the helicopter's engagement area. The US, they have a couple of SHORAD units that have APS, so they can actually bang with helicopters tit for tat and still come out on top because of it. Russia also have a lot of IFV options, and most of them are pretty good actually. So that's something that the US struggles with, is actually getting troops to the front line in a decent vehicle that can still be used for combat. And finally, the US has the advantage in the air because they have a number of aircraft that have super insane stealth rating of 1.75, whereas Russia, they only have a single aircraft that has a stealth rating above 1, and it only sits at 1.25. So the US has the advantage in the air. All right, moving on with our first category within the recon area, it is going to be the Observer. These are our ground reconnaissance unit. They have long range optics, they have high concealment, and they have the ability to laser designate targets. However, they're super poor at engaging anything head to head. They're not there to take a fair fight, and normally you just have them on hold fire, and you only engage if it's a super opportune target and you don't have indirect fire to do the destruction for you. They can be destroyed easily and safely by helicopters and IFVs because snipers really don't have any answer to those, and because they're so quick, you can't even get away. So once they're spotted, they do get taken out rather easily. The best observer that the Russians get is the Snipery. For 75 bucks, keep it on its default loadout so it's nice and cheap. Main reason for this is normally when you're pushing these out, they're going to run into another unit, or they're the most likely to run into another unit. And like I said, they're poor at head-to-head combat and they're just going to die. So that's why you want to keep them as cheap as possible so you're not passing over as many points to the enemy. Like I said, they're easily engaged and killed by enemy helicopters and IFV. So if you are shooting at them, you're going to get spotted and you're going to lose your dudes. So it's better off keep them cheap, keep them on hold fire, use them there just for that observation and the ability to laser designate. The reason why they're the best is because they're the cheapest. It's pretty straightforward. Second is the VDV Snipery for 85. 3-man squad this time instead of the 2-man squad. 2-man squad's also very easy to fit into your IFVs or into your supply trucks. If you just need to throw 1 or 2 in there, they're really easy to fill some seats. 3 is pretty good as well. They're a little bit more expensive. However, these also come with suppressors, which means if you do want to engage, as long as you're at the right range, then you can remain unseen. So these do have options to actually engage pretty well. But you will still see the smoke trace of the round, so be careful with that. An honorable mention needs to go to the PDSS for 80 bucks. These are a super cool unit. They're the only one that's amphibious up here, so you can, on certain maps that all their names are escaping me right now, You can just sit these guys in the water, and because they're stealth rating, no one's actually going to see them. And unless they also have an amphibious unit that just so happens to be going in the middle of fucking water, which who does that? The two options are both trash. Both these weapons are garbage. The grenade launcher, you'd think it'd be good, but its dispersion value hurts it a lot along with its aim time. So it can't actually, shock people because they're going to engage first and probably shock you. But the biggest downside, other than its firepower, which is firepower doesn't matter because you're putting it on hold fire, but as you can see, it can't laser designate, which is a huge downside for an observation unit. So that's why it's an honorable mention, because it does do something super unique, sit in the water. But it's not, if you got land, other options for land, I'd use anything else other than these on the land. All right, moving on with our infantry tab. The first one is going to be our line infantry. These are our meat shields. They're going to be a 7-man squad that wins battles against specialist infantry and reconnaissance teams. Except for the anti-infantry. So they're going to beat, the MANPAD teams, the ATGM teams, the anti-armor ambush teams. They're going to beat all of them in a heads-up battle. They destroy light armor because they all pack some kind of handheld rocket launcher, and they deter heavy armor because none of the heavy armor want to take the critical hits that handheld rocket launchers inflict. They're hard to displace because of their squad size, which means they have high health, and the better line infantry, they also have good armor as well. One of the key downsides for these is that due to their limited rocket launchers, or sometimes the limited ammo count that they might have, they require multiple squads in order to be effective against the medium to heavily armored vehicles. The best one of these that the Russia get, I believe, is the Morskaya Pakota. I don't know how to pronounce this shit, but you know what I mean. It's on the screen. The reason why is 75 is really cheap for a line infantry. It has 8 armor, which is super good. Not the best. The best is 10, but for line infantry, this is about as good as it gets for Russia. They get some solid weaponry as well as 2 light machine guns to, deal with infantry. And the RPG, the RPG 27 is actually a super solid option as well. The number 2 option is the Descent Nikki. Okay, it's got the same armor, but because they're a higher body count, they're actually a bit more tankier. It's got the same main weapon, still got the GLA. However, it has the medium machine gun, which is much better than the light machine gun because the penetration actually makes a fair bit of difference. It gets a little bit worse with its RPG, and it's 5 points more as well. So the main reason that these guys, the airborne lads, aren't above the coastal lads is because the one big downside is actually in the machine gun area, right? So these guys would normally best out these guys in my books in this role because they're tankier. They can just hold that line just a little bit better because of that option. However, the way that these are used, where you're dropping them onto an enemy point or enemies are dropping onto you and these guys are the first ones that's going to cop the grunt, means that you're quite often going to get into close quarters combat, so in the same building as another unit. So when you look at rifle stats, if they don't have a minimum range, then they'll use them in buildings. So as you can see, they'll use their rifles, but they won't use their grenade launchers because they got a minimum range of 12. Where this matters when it comes to these units is that this medium machine gun has a minimum range, whereas the light machine gun does not. So the coastal lads are going to beat out the Descentaniki every time in a building, as will most line infantry. So they're very weak if you actually just get into the building with them, which is the one thing that's really hurting them, despite their large squad size. An honorable mention actually needs to be made to the Spetsnaz GRU in the Recon tab. These guys are insane. 10 armor, 8 troops is just so tanky, and it's so hard for the other line infantry to get to beat in combat. These guys actually beat all other line infantry in battle, mainly due to 2 VSS having 50% ignore cover is insane, and the 10 armor. They're the only line infantry that Russia get that have the 10 armor. And if I'm running them as line infantry, which I would not recommend, but they are cool to do it in a pinch, I'd run it with the Verba and the RPG 28s. This keeps them flexible enough to take on literally anything that gets thrown at it. Because if you put them in ambusher, they just get so expensive so quickly. And the only reason why this isn't number one, because it is the best unit, is its price. 130 for something that's going to get bombed to the shithouse by artillery and stuff like that. Not too good. But if you use the other line infantry, such as the coastal lads, to hold the main capture point and push these in to create a line forward of that, they can be super effective and very hard to kill. Moving on with our CQB unit, this can either come in the green or grey role, green being in forests and grey being in buildings. They're our anti-infantry specialists. They have close range weaponry, normally shorter than 300 meters, sometimes including shotguns as well. The green role specialists, they always have HE launchers or thermobaric launchers, and the grey role have flashbangs to help them instantly panic enemy troops in buildings. They absolutely destroy infantry. The downside is that they're useless against anything else. Another downside is that it can be rather difficult to close the distance with them if you're not using smoke or the concealment of a forest to get to where you're in that effective range of their weapon systems. And when it comes to the grey role troops in particular, all the troops that have flashbangs only have one charge. So if you get in a building with them and they immediately get out of it, you've wasted your charge and you either need to resupply or you've just lost that capability, in which case you're kind of down a weapon system. So they're a bit, I don't know, I'd like to see the flashbangs have more charges than one, but keep it in mind. The best one of these that the Russian get is the SSO. It's got 10 armor, 8 troops, insane, 4 smokes, absolutely awesome. $85 is so fucking cheap. Yeah, it's normal high damage assault rifle. You've got the GLA to panic. You've got a couple of light machine guns as well, which is really good. And these don't have a minimum range, so they'll always be using them. As well as 2 thermobaric launchers, which are super good against infantry. And they also have the flashbangs. So this means these are, I believe, the only unit in the game that covers both green and grey role as a CQB unit. Every other one is either a split. It either has a thermobaric or it has the flashbangs. So these guys are so good on their close quarters loadout. Definitely the best in class. The second best is the Cherny Beretti with the thermobaric launcher. For a very similar reason as the SSO, is the thermobaric launcher is just awesome. 105 penetration with 10.5 damage means that even against some of the lighter IFV, these guys can take them down, especially if you're using them to, like, multiple of them to flank. And if you can get the rear armor, even better. So you're going to mince the infantry. You can potentially do okay against the vehicles as well. You don't have many rounds, but they mince through infantry in forests. These are grey roll because they don't have flashbangs. They can chew through the forest just as well as the SSO. SSO just has that little bit more flexibility. The runner-up, or an honourable mention, needs to be made for the Ingenierie Sturmoviki. So, on particularly what you see on screen right now, the thermobaric rocket loadout. As you see, they get 2 launchers, which is super sick. And they got the same one as the Cherny Beretti with the 105 and the 10.5 damage. They still have the 10 armor, 7 squad size, which is awesome. They're not going to go down easy, and they got 1 smoke. I think what a lot of people get in the, I'm gonna say this might be an unpopular opinion, but the noob trap of running the assault shield. So this is your grey roll, and the thermobaric is your green roll option for these. So forest versus building. The difference is that you get shotguns, which are okay, they're pretty good. But like I said, the big issue with flashbangs is you only get 1 charge. And with thermobarics, you get plenty of them with this. So these guys are good out to 400 meters against infantry all the time. And they are highly effective. Against, say, the airborne line infantry, the NGWS, this loadout will go down to about 3 to 4 squad members when the airborne troop is dead within 400 meters of them. Whereas the assault shield variant, even at 100 meters away from them in the forest, because you can't use your flashbangs in that situation, these guys will be left on one troop, which shows you just how much difference there is between having a thermobaric launcher and not having it. I think the flashbang version of this troop is a bit of a bait. I think the thermobaric one is insane. And like I said, it has that good penetration that you can also handle vehicles just that little bit more, and they really don't expect it out of this troop, because 9 times out of 10, you're seeing them with the flashbangs on. Next up, we have our anti-armor teams. These are our close range anti-armor fucking lads. They have multiple rocket launchers that can engage at distances as close as 25 meters. Some even closer than that. They absolutely destroy armor at close range, and each of their rockets inflict a critical hit onto vehicles, which can severely hamper them to either line them up for follow-on indirect fire if you get the mobility kills, or just completely take them out of the game by killing their loader or their optics lad. The downside is, funnily enough, they're useless at everything else. The best version of this, funnily enough, comes from the recon tab. It's the Diversante on the ambushes loadout. Everyone looks past these because they just look like a sniper, and they're not too bad as a sniper, not the best, but the ambushes loadout is where it is at. Okay, not only are you more stealthy, which helps you get into your ambush location, but you get these RPG 30s. And on the surface, you might be looking at it thinking 650, 9, 4 of them. Doesn't sound that too crash hot. The difference is, and this is unique in both factions, no other handheld rocket launcher team have an RPG or a rocket launcher that does not get intercepted by APS. As you can see here, it doesn't have it. If we look at anyone else, the Spetsnaz GRU, have a look at their RPG 28. Destroyed by APS plus. Diversante ambushes are the only ones that don't. So some people that get, overconfident and they just throw their tanks into the forest, or they just throw some IFE with some infantry in it, thinking they'll be right. This thing minces it. Absolutely minces it. APS or not, doesn't matter. This thing's going to fucking annihilate it. So these are best. Not even close. Funnily enough, we kind of alluded to it earlier, but the second best is the Spetsnaz GRU on their anti-armor, or their, what is this, RPG 28 heavy anti-tank loadout. Okay, they're very expensive. They get a good number of rounds though. 6 rounds is quite a good amount. And the beautiful thing with these is that if you're taking on specifically IFVs, they can kill tanks no dramas as well, because 900 pen and 10 damage is insane. As you can see, compare it to the Moors squad, which most people see is like the fucking optimal, is 608.5, so 910 is awesome. But as we talked about already within the line infantry, is against those IFV, when you kill the tank or the IFV and the troops come out, these things can also kill the fucking troops, like really easily. So they're very hard to displace. Normally the main tactic is to throw either a lot of shit at it, or bomb the fuck out of it. So, yeah, keep them in mind. They're really good. And an honorable mention also needs to go to these vampire fucking lads. Anti-armor team that the Russians get, they get 2 of them. 650 and 9 is pretty nice. Decent squad size, but no armor means they do fall apart pretty quickly. But because of the round count, once you get them into their position, especially if you can set up 2 squads, 1 on each side, they'll mince anything as well. They are super nice, but not quite as good as the other ones that we've already spoken about. So, honorable mention. Next up, we have our ATGM teams, or anti-tank guided missile. So they're our dismounted long-range anti-armor capability. They have missile launchers that can fire beyond 1,000 meters in range, and they deter any kind of armor from the area. The reason I say deter instead of destroy is because those armor will normally go behind buildings or break line of sight, and the missile will go off target. But it stops them from coming straight into the area. Even if you do land 1 hit, you're never going to get a 1-hit kill unless they've already taken damage beforehand. So you're going to need multiple, and most people have a good enough macro that they will get them out of the way before their vehicles will actually get destroyed. The downside of these units is, yep, they're useless against anything other than vehicles at their nice range. Because you normally want to put these in good vantage points along main supply routes, they are quite easily targeted by indirect fire and cruise missiles because they're just nice position. The best one that the Russians have is the VDV Hornet. You can upgrade it or not. I don't think the difference matters that much. I don't think it makes or breaks the unit. I think both versions are good because it has 2 Hornet launchers, which means one missile is going to get past APS, and if they don't have APS, this will actually destroy vehicles at a good range. Depending on how you're building your deck, and if you got spare points to float around, if you have the spare points, I'd spend it on upgrading. If you don't have the spare points or you're a little bit over and you need to cut costs, I'd drop these back. It's not going to make or break the unit. The upgrade gives you 200 meters more range and a little bit more penetration and a little bit more damage, which is all super nice. But the default one is also super good as well. So it depends on what's best for your deck in that regard. The next best, I believe, is going to be the PTRK Factoria. They have the... I'm not going to say it, but they got that one. A little bit less range, but they do get 2 of them, which is super nice. They do lack the penetration and the damage of the previously mentioned Cornet, but having 2 is super nice. You will feel these significantly against the highest armored vehicles, but against most of the things that you're going to be shooting at, IFVs, supply vehicles, and some of the lighter tanks that don't have APS, these are still going to do the business. So don't worry about it too much, and it's still going to stop people from running at them. I would definitely upgrade it because the default one, you start to get really low on that penetration and that damage, and you lose a little bit of range as well. And additionally, not that you're ever going to use them for their rifles, but by upgrading, you also get a little bit of boost for your assault rifle as well, which is a little bit nice. So I'd always keep these in the upgraded ones. 65 is still super cheap. So yeah. Next up, we have our MANPAD teams, or our Man Portable Air Defense System. These are our dismounted anti-helicopter lads. They carry anti-aircraft launchers that can target helicopters. So when you hover over it, it'll say anti-aircraft launcher. And when you check into what it can actually target, it'll make sure it can target helicopters. They deter helicopters from the area. Normally the handheld launchers, they don't do enough damage to kill a helicopter before that helicopter can run away, especially with the flares and everything else that the helicopter has. But no helicopter is going to sit there and bang it out with a MANPAD team. So they just stop them from entering the area. Very similar to the ATGM team that we just talked about, but for helicopters. They're useless against everything else. Huge downside. And very similar to the ATGM team, because you want to have them in good lines of sight to the front so you can engage any kind of helicopter that goes anywhere near you. They are a big target for indirect fire and cruise missiles, so keep them mobile or keep them outside the building until it's time to step them up. The best one of these is in the motorized infantry, the PZRK Igla S. This is the upgraded version. The N is the default. The S is the better version. The better version gets 200 more meters of range and better damage on the assault rifles. Not that you're using them for that, but it's nice to have. The 200 meters range is what really does it. These are the only Russian one that get 2 anti-aircraft launchers. So that is super nice. They do lack rounds. 6 rounds isn't a whole lot, but it's not the worst, but it could be better. But the fact they have 2 means that sometimes you can actually get surprise kills if the enemy is not expecting it, particularly if you wait for it to get a bit closer and then jump into the building. The next best is going to be the PZRK Verba. Yeah, so the main difference between the Verba and the Igla is the Verba has more range, more penetration, more damage. It's only very little though, and it's definitely more beneficial to have another launcher. But because all the other Russian MANPAD teams, they only have a single launcher, the best single launcher is the Verba. Moving on with our support infantry, these are the ones that assist our line infantry in holding that line. They don't want to be shot at though, so keep that in mind. They have medium range weaponry, normally between 400 meters and 1,000 meters. So they're not too close where they start getting into the line infantry territory, and they're not so far that they're turning into a MANPAD team or an ATGM team. They're kind of in the middle there somewhere. They're effective against infantry, and depending on their loadout, they can also have a decent effect, normally on vehicles as well, a lot of these loadouts. They destroy light armor and heavy armor only when combined with line infantry, so they can, one of them will get the flank shots off. They are rather weak at close combat though. You don't want to put these up against line troops, they'll lose every time. But if you use them within their good range of normally around that 600 meter mark, then mint. So position them, you know, just that one line of buildings back from where your front line is. Perfect. So the best unit that the Russians get for this is actually in the Recon tab. It's the VDV Spetsnaz for $70. Put on its RPG-16 launcher loadout. What this does, a 700 meter rocket that 300 pen, not great. 6 damage, not great. But if it gets a flank shot, it's definitely going to do the business. But where this unit really makes its money is in the SVDK. So a lot of other units get the SVD. It's okay. The SVDK is a huge upgrade, and they have 2 of them, and they both ignore cover. So these things kind of just mince up infantry, and for its cost, it's really good. It can stay hidden until you need to use it, and it can also laser designate in a pinch if you really do need that. But put this one layer back and you'll be surprised by its effectiveness. It's pretty awesome. My next favorite is the Gornostreki. I think this gets shit on a lot. I don't think I've heard anyone really talk good about this unit, but I think it's insane when used right. It doesn't have armor, which is why it's not a line infantry. Don't try to use it as a line infantry. That's probably where people are going wrong, if I had to guess. But if you use it as a support unit, because it gets the SVD, it's awesome. It gets 2 of them. Because it's a marksman rifle, it has that 50% ignore cover, so it's going to mince up the infantry. And it also gets the Metis, which is actually a pretty serviceable anti-armor capability. Decent range, decent pen, decent damage. The main thing that's putting this in second place over the Spetsnaz is the SVD versus SVDK. Here you can see the differences. You got 15 and 1.8 versus 10 and 1.2. So you can see why the SVDK is so much more effective against infantry. However, the Gornostreki have that Metis, which is better versus armor, and they're cheaper, which is super nice. So use them as a support unit, and you'll get a lot more effectiveness out of the Gornostreki. And you'll actually be surprised using them that way, how good they are. Bring in 2 line infantry, 1 support unit behind it. What a lineup that is. And honorable mention, we got 2 honorable mentions this time. The first one is going to be the SSO on their standoff variation. Okay, it costs $5 more, but what you get out of this is actually fucking insane. Okay, so you get the rifles, GLA, yeah, no dramas there. You get the medium machine gun, which, yep, that's pretty good against dealing with infantry and buildings. But you get the SVD 98, and it's a dedicated sniper rifle, not a marksman rifle, which means it gets 100% ignore cover. So this thing's going to dominate infantry. The only reason it's an honorable mention and not just the #1 outright is because it gets this Cornet M, which you might think, Cornet, that's anti-fucking vehicle. Incorrect. The Cornet M, specifically this one, the rounds that this troop carries are anti-infantry rounds. 150 pen, 15 damage. They can target vehicles, but they're not going to do a good job of it. But these things will absolutely, in combination with the SV98, which can shoot out to 800, the Cornet can shoot out even further than that, these things will decimate infantry at range. One of the biggest drawbacks of this unit, and the reason why you wouldn't use it in its standoff loadout, is because its close combat loadout is just so good, which we've already spoken about. Additionally, as a support unit, not being able to target armor is a bit of a fucking weakness, and like I said, it's just so good at the CQB role that it's a bit of a waste in this role when there's other options such as the Gornostreki or the VDV Spetsnaz. The other honorable mention, which I think is underutilized heavily, is the Pulamichiki Cord. Okay, this is the upgraded one with the Cord heavy machine gun. These guys get 2 of them, as you can see there. Look at these fucking gangsters. Oh my lordy. Okay, these things, 20 penetration, 2 damage. These things mince up infantry. They do a really good job and kill things really quickly. They're shooting out to 800 meters range. That's awesome. They get 2 RPGs, so not a whole lot, but enough where, you know, it only takes 1 or 2 flanking hits and the armor's dealt with anyway. So it's enough. It's the bare minimum, but it's enough. But just the 2 of the cords are pretty nice. Give it a go if you don't have the other options. All right, the last one within the infantry tab and the one that's unique to Russia are the disposable troops. These are your super cheap version of other infantry. These are very cheap, normally less than 60, or not normally, they are less than 60. They can be easily spammed, especially with IFV spam, which we're about to get into, but Russia has awesome IFV options as well. So in combination with IFV, being able to just fill them with this shit unit does really well. It forces the enemy to waste resources to deal with it. So even though it's a relatively weak unit, it's still a unit and it still needs to be dealt with. So they need to send something to deal with it. They are not effective in a one-on-one battle because they're cheap. They're normally a little bit shitter, so they can't win that heads-up fight. But because they're so cheap and you can spam them, multiple of them can defeat good enemy units. So use them in groups, and they can be destroyed easily, normally due to either low armor or just not as potent offensively, so they kind of just get out damaged. The best one of these is the VDV Dish. Okay, these guys are 5 troops, is super nice. There's a couple of 10-person transports that you can fit these in. They actually have 8 armor, which is why they hold up a little bit better than most of the other disposable troops. But the fact that there's 5 of them, they do go down pretty quickly. These are like your cheap version of your anti-armor ambush teams. They get these RPG 7Vs, they get 2 of them. Decent pen, decent damage, a lot of rounds, which is cool. And they also have a little bit of weaponry to deal with infantry, but they're really not going to win an infantry fight. But you can get a lot of these out, and I'm sure you've seen it. They are pretty potent, and they do a good job of it. The second is the Sturmoviki. These actually just got nerfed because they were completely busted. The old version of these had 10 armor and were 5 less points. Which is fucking absurd. They were so good. They had a decent rifle, like 1.2 is okay for something that costs 50 and 8 troops, 2 medium machine guns, and some barrack launchers. So they couldn't deal. They're like your cheap line infantry, but they can't affect vehicles. But they can do a pretty good job against infantry because of the HE rounds. It's kind of a shit barrack launcher, but it's a barrack launcher nonetheless. So these are still super potent, and if you can get them in the forest, especially with the combination of the barrack launchers and the grenade launchers, they can really deal with infantry really well. Or they can just sit on a cap and just soak damage because 8 armor, 40 health, they're going to take a hit. And the last one is these fire dudes. I'm just going to call them Ognamatichiki, okay? They got 6 armor, so they fall apart real quick. But they have this super interesting tech being the incendiary rounds. So once you engage with these guys, you're probably not going to get them to live, to be honest. They're going to kill any infantry that stands still in front of it just because it'll flame out, unless they die beforehand, which even if they do, they're going to take something, they're going to do like 90% of the infantry's health. If the enemy react by sprinting towards you or sprinting out of the flame, that means that they're not engaging you. And they're going to be shocked. Once they reach that shock and the sprint wears off, then they're no longer going to be very good at moving. And the second incendiary round then is enough to kill them, and you can sprint these guys out. They're very good to just send through forest if you know there's infantry in there, because they're cheap. They will get the job done. You'll lose them in the process, but it's kind of like a handshake deal. You die, I die, but I got the forest. Next up, we're moving into our vehicle tab, starting with IFVs or infantry fighting vehicles. These are troop transports that can also play a part within the ground fight as well. They have troop capacity, normally with an autocannon, or some have just main cannons. They harass infantry at safe distances. If they get too close, because they're normally lightly armored, they can fall over to the line infantry weaponry, which is normally around that 500 to 600 meter range is most of the rocket launcher range. So just beyond that is the sweet spot for IFVs. They can harass helicopters as well if they get too close, because most of them, like I said, have autocannons. So if you can hide them behind vehicles, bait those aircraft in, pop out behind them, and you can get some rather quick kills while they stay within your engagement range. The biggest downside is that they're very vulnerable to anti-armor assets, whether it be ATGM teams or the closer range anti-armor teams. The best of these, I believe, is in the mechanized infantry, the BPM 3M for $105. Okay, when you go to the upgrades, put it on the second one, the BMP 3M turret, and chuck reactive armor on it as well. The reason why you want this turret is because when you upgrade it to the 3M, you actually get this ECM. 30% ECM means that those ATGMs and the long-range missiles that the Russian tanks and vehicles fire off, and the random shit that the US throw at you as well with javelins and that, you can just soak up so many rounds with just 30%. It's absurd. For an IFE, that is awesome, and it rivals APS. The reason you don't go all the way up to the highest one, other than cost, is that even though you improve on your firepower, you lose your ECM. So I don't think that's worth it. I think the 3M is fucking ideal. It's exactly what you want out of your IFE. It's got a really solid cannon. It's got a really solid chain gun. It's got that ECM. It holds 7 dudes. Give it the reactive armor because it's carrying troops, and it bumps it over that 15 health total, which means it's a 2 to 3 hit for most things. Whereas by default, it can get pretty squashed if it gets unlucky. Next up, the number 2, I reckon, is the B-15 Kurganets. It has a really nice 57mm chain gun. The 57mm chain gun is very similar to the US's Bushmaster versus Bushmaster 2, the 30mm and the 57mm. So anything with a 57 is a lot better, but keep in mind it does come in different variations. So this is a 57 with 75 pen, and the Barbarous, for example, it has the 57, but it has the 120 pen, which this is the best one. All right, but the reason why I really like the Kurganets is offensively, it is super sweet. Okay, it gets the cornets, but you have to stay stationary to use them. So it's like after you drop off the infantry and you're just chilling in a fucking chill out position, these are super nice to have. It also gets the Blats, which these don't have great penetration, but the main upside of these is that they knock off enemy APS, for one. And secondly, they can be fired on the move. So you don't actually have to go out of your way to use these. And there's a good range on them and you get a good amount. So they're actually really solid and they can target infantry. With all this combined, this makes this actually a really lethal vehicle. As well as having 2 charges for $30, 2 APS charges for $30. It's actually pretty nice and it's really good to help it keep alive. And if you just keep topping it up, keeping it in the fight, it can be really annoying for the enemy to deal with. And it kind of forces them to, spend assets out of their way to deal with it, because regular line infantry aren't going to be able to deal with this thing. An honorable mention is going to go to the BTR 82 Alpha. The reason this thing's actually pretty solid, okay, 8 dudes, 16 health is pretty nice, is the speed. 100 speed is incredible. It has a pretty serviceable 30mm chain cannon. I would not upgrade to the next one because you don't really get much out of it. You get the Conkers, but that's, you have to stop to fire it and you only get 2 shots. I'm not going to be spending all my APM constantly fucking refreshing this thing. So keep it cheap. Keep it cheap. It's a nice, fast vehicle that can hold I think every Russian squad. I don't think there's a Russian squad that comes above. Oh no, there's a couple of the VDV ones that have 10. but 8 troops can carry almost everything, so that's a really nice option as well. And even though it's a 30 mil, it can still take out other heavily armored targets if you can get to the rear and flank armor. So because they're so cheap, combine these specifically with some of those disposable troops to really just flood things into the battle, flank with the fast moving vehicles, use your disposable troops to just cause a fucking ruckus, and you can get a lot done with these actually. The old school top dog was the T-15 Barbarous. It recently got nerfed where its price went from 300 up to 350. And even though it's still insane offense-wise, the cost increase is just too steep now. It just means that you have to take out so much shit for it to trade effectively, and it's so much harder to employ at the start of the battle, which is where these were the most potent. So I'd probably steer clear of the Barbarous. I think it's been over-nerfed a little bit. That's why it's not on the list at all. Moving on, we have our MBT, or our main battle tank. These are our heavy armor asset. They have strong frontal armor with a powerful cannon. They can absorb munitions because of their armor, whether it be ATGM or handheld rocket launchers. They destroy light and medium armor. So if there's someone annoying you with a fucking IFV or something like that, send an MBT at them. You'll sort them out every day. Just make sure you don't get flanked. They also do battle with other MBTs. It's kind of the little handshake deal where you bring a tank, I bring a tank, we shoot at each other, we both smoke up and go and repair, and we call it a day. But at least if we're calling it a day, our fucking infantry aren't getting done in by them. These things are super effective against infantry, in saying that because of the powerful cannons, and they normally have machine guns on top as well, they can just start chewing through infantry if they're allowed to. In saying that, they're very vulnerable to anti-armor assets, particularly when those assets can get their flanks. That's one of the big things you need to be aware of, and make sure you know what the reverse hotkey is. Spoiler alert, it's fucking R. And make sure you always keep that frontal armor towards the whatever's shooting at you. They are very slow in forests, which means these are very, very easily flanked when they're in forest. So if you don't know what's in the forest, I probably wouldn't send an MBT in first. I'd send a disposable troop out in front to see what it is. Or maybe one of your IFV, the cheap IFV or something like that. But probably... if you're just sending this in blind, you're probably going to get them killed. They are our first HVT on the list. By HVT, what I mean by that is that the enemy will do almost anything to take them out. They'll use their multiple aircraft to try to bomb it, or cruise missile, or indirect fire, or send their other tanks. They're going to go out of their way to get rid of it because it's such a pest. All right, I know I'm going to piss some people off with this, but I'm going to do it anyway, damn it. The best MBT that the Russians get is the T90. Just the stock fucking T90. Okay, it's $170. That is so cheap for this amount of armor. As long as you do, it's got really weak side armor, so definitely keep it at range. But normal shit cannot deal with this. They have to send something. 16 health is good. It means it doesn't fall over straight away. The Russian tanks are really nice because they have a very nice spread of munitions, including these 1600 meter missiles, which are super good. This thing cannot bang against other MBTs. Do not try to do that. It is not what it's for. It will fucking annihilate light vehicles though. Light armor, forget about it. Infantry, forget about it. The reason why this is insane isn't just because it's cheap. Okay, it's because it's cheap, but it also gets that 30% ECM that we talked about. So it's got all that frontal armor. They have to commit something to it. And whatever they commit to it is likely going to miss shots because of the ECM. And for $170, you just get so much value out of this. And they're so easy to spam. Where if you consider a lot of the traditional best MBTs that are around that 350 mark, would you rather have one of those that gets done by a single plane, or one bad ATGM hit and they're out of the fight, versus two of these and the firepower that they can inflict? If these guys get flanking shots onto other tanks, they can still fucking annihilate it. Don't worry about that. But for 170, it's just absurd. The second best, I think, is the T90M Arena. So don't worry about upgrading its machine gun. It doesn't make that much difference. And you want to keep the cost down. And just going up enough to get the Arena, or the APS, getting the 4 charges of it, means that this thing has enough firepower to bang against other tanks. So, whereas you can use your T90 to bait and maybe absorb the first shell just so you're wasting their loading time, so that your T90M Arena can come in and land that first shot. This thing gets much better kinetic penetration at up to 450, which means it can bang against tanks, like I said. The reason that we don't want to go any more than the Arena APS, because you only get increased side armor, and it's not that much of an upgrade, and you get 1 more health point, which is, like, that's okay, but I'd rather keep the cost down, because you kind of, at 320 bucks, you're at that break point where any aircraft that's going to come and kill you is around 340, around. Okay, some are a little bit more expensive. Some can get as low as like 320. But what this means is that as long as you've got a good air defense network set up, this thing will trade even. The plane kills it, you kill the plane, you normally come out a little bit on top, and that's if you've killed nothing on the ground. Whereas once you start bumping it up in cost, then it can be a bit iffy. You kind of have to kill a number of things on the ground before you get its cost back. An honorable mention needs to go to the T14 Armada. In a vacuum, this is the best tank in the game. It's absolutely insane. I'd definitely upgrade it to the upper armor. I wouldn't worry about the missile upgrade. You're not really going to use the missiles a whole lot, so it doesn't make that much of a difference. It's not worth the 20 points, that's for sure. The main reason why this isn't higher up on the list is because of its cost. It's insane, and it's definitely well priced at 400, but you just can't use them every game. Specifically, if you don't have air superiority, or your air defense network keeps getting shot down, this thing can trade negatively very easily. Anything in the air can pretty much kill this, and even if the plane goes down, it'll be worth it. So because of that, that's why it's not higher up. You don't want to be spamming these things. You want to be really cautious with them, actually, because you don't want to give away so many points. It does have insane armor, and it does have the insane firepower. But just keep it in mind. I think the T90M Arena can fill a very similar role for significantly cheaper. And another difference is for the heat rounds and the missiles, the cheapo T70 has the 750 and 9, whereas the T90 Arena has the 850 and 10. So at range, it actually bangs the same as the T14. It's only once you start to get closer range and you start using those kinetic munitions that the Armada starts taking over on the firepower. So up until then, the Armada is only better in mobility and armor. And it's not even that much. So for 80 bucks cheaper, getting those good trades in is much more beneficial. I still think it's good to bring one T14 just in case the enemy is having a really hard time dealing with your stock T90s and you start to see them bomb them. You bring out a T90M Arena, they're like, fuck, I just bombed the fucking cheap one. This thing's fucking me up. And then you put one of these on the back end of it, and now they're just behind the 8-ball, and you can really just push through them. It's almost like a tank spam, but yeah, it is super effective. Another honorable mention is going to be made to the BRM 3K57. This is actually in the reconnaissance tab, and it's a beauty little thing. A lot of people don't know about this little thing, but when you upgrade it all the way up, because it's a shitty, reconnaissance vehicle, but if you bump it all the way up, this actually has the exact same firepower as the Barbarous. It's got the same gun, the same machine gun, the same attackers. It has the same firepower, and the Barbarous is, like, one of the things it's known for is, like, being tanky, but also having insane firepower that can kill MBTs by just circling them. The BRM 3K57 can do the exact same thing. This cannon, like, chews through helicopters, no drama. As long as you keep your distance and kind of use these more on to flank in, get those side shots. These things will terrorize the enemy, both infantry and vehicles alike. And because they're a reconnaissance unit, having that increased optics and that little bit more stealth does help it out a lot with, finding those targets and engaging them with the attackers and everything else. So super underrated vehicle. Give it a go. Lastly, in the vehicle tab, we have our ATGM vehicles, so our mounted long-range anti-armor capability. These guys have missile launchers that can fire beyond 1,000 meters in range. They deter armor from the area, very similar to the dismounted ATGM teams, except these can move around a little bit. They're a bit interchangeable depending on the terrain, depending on where you want to be, depending on the map and what position you're playing. Is what determines whether you want a infantry, like a dismounted, or the mounted version. The mounted version is more mobile, so you can kind of move with the front a little bit more. The dismounts, they can get in buildings. So in some of those urban ones where you can't get the concealment for your mounted ones, your dismounteds normally have that higher concealment rating, so they're better in the urban environment. They are very vulnerable to close combat. Anything gets near these things, they'll normally fall over. Very similar to the dismounted ATGM teams. Because they're in a nice vantage point, they're often targets for indirect fire and cruise missiles. So you do have to either move them around or keep them hidden. The best one of these is the 9P157 Chrysanthema. I would upgrade it to the Chrysanthema option. It just gets more range, more damage. And it's a pretty cheap upgrade. And I would also upgrade its armor as well. Like I said, 15 health is kind of the breakpoint that you want to get beyond. So going up to 16 makes it harder to kill from most of the things that are going to shoot back at it. The reason this thing's really nice is it is one of the few mounted ATGM mounted ATGM launchers that actually gets multi-targets and 2 missiles per target. That is really nice. As well as having the auto reloading means that when you're banging it out with another ATGM or a tank shooting at you and you're both stressed, you can still rattle off those rounds, no dramas. You're not going to slow down, whereas they will get affected by that stress and panicked when you get there. The second best is the Cornet D1. I would upgrade it, so go from the Cornet M up to the Cornet ATGM. What this does is give you a second launcher. And I would also upgrade it as well for the same reasons that we just spoke about. The main differences between the two is that the Cornet D1 is $35 more expensive, which I think isn't really needed. For $100 you get what you need. The Cornet has less range, less damage, or less range and less penetration, which is fine because it comes with a smoke to make up for it. So but you get your smoke to make up for it. And because there's 2 launches, that also means that you get 2 missiles per target. So you can, very similar to the Chrysanthema, you can bypass that APS because one of them is going to get through. Smoke for $35 and lose a bit of your damage, I don't think is the best trade because most things, when they get shot at by this thing, they're the ones that are going to smoke. And you can kind of use their smoke to get away if you need to. So I think that's why it's number 2, because it can still ripple fire, but it's just not quite as good as the Chrysanthema. All right, moving into our support tab, the first thing we have on is our air defense unit. These are our anti-aircraft and anti-missile capability. They have surface-to-air missiles with radar capability and the ability to target aircraft. They assist with gaining and maintaining air superiority for your team. They protect ground forces from cruise missiles by intercepting them. However, they are vulnerable to everything. Nearly anything will fucking kill these things, even the weakest of infantry. Another negative for the air defense unit is that if you're using your radar, you can get automatically targeted by anti-radiation missiles. So that can keep you occupied, turning your radar on and off to protect it. So keep that in mind. They are a HVT, the same as MBTs. That means the enemy will throw everything they've got at them. So once these do get revealed, you need to keep them moving or you're going to lose them. I think the best one of these that the Russians get is the S300 V4 Anti. Personally, I would keep it with just the 2 missiles. You can upgrade it, but you lose 500 meters of distance, which is quite significant actually. The 4,500 is one of the furthest in the game, which is really nice. And it has that magical above 20 damage, which means it's going to one-shot it's going to one-shot aircraft that it gets clean hit off on. The downside with having just 2 missiles means that you need to deploy this with a supply, pretty much sit them on top of each other. If you keep the supply nice and small, or keep the supply vehicle with it, so that when you do get spotted, you can move it away slightly so you can remain untargeted. Russian air defense, because they lack a lot of rounds, they often need to sit with supply anyway. So if I'm going to sit with supply, I'd rather be cheap at 150 and have that extra range anyway. Because even if this does go down for 150 points, as long as it takes down a single drone, this thing's going to pay for itself. So it very quickly is worth its weight in gold. The next best, the number 2, I think, is the S350 Vityaz. This is because even though it doesn't have the one-shotting capability, it gets the 12 missiles, much less range at 3,600. But because it gets so many missiles, this is our one that kills missiles. Cruise missiles, anti-radiation missiles. This is the thing that'll deal with them and protect our team and our ground troops from them. It can have 3 multi-targets and 2 missiles per target, so it can still take out aircraft not too bad. But we're mainly bringing this to protect ourselves from cruise missiles is the main thing. And it's the best at it that the Russians get. I think a honorable mention also needs to be made to the S300 PM2 Favorite with its upgraded missiles. This gives it not quite the same range as the anti. Okay, you get 200 less range, but you do have 4 missiles. So if you're one of those people that you don't want to sit your supply on your anti, then the Favorite is probably better suited to yourself because it still does a very similar capability. Next up, we have SHORAD, or our Short Range Air Defense. These are our mounted anti-helicopter units. They destroy helicopters with missiles and sometimes autocannons. They are very vulnerable to armor and ATGMs. Because they also often need to be in a good vantage point, they are vulnerable to indirect fire and cruise missiles. Similar to the air defense, the SHORAD is also vulnerable to anti-radiation missiles if you have your radar on. However, sometimes they can also be used to protect your air defense units and have them both with their radars on, so they both contribute to taking out incoming missiles. And that's how you start to develop your air defense net. I believe the best SHORAD that the Russians get is actually the 96K6 Panzer S1. It starts out as this Tunguska, upgraded all the way, and you get the Panzer. It is really nice. So it has a really nice 2400 range on its missile. It gets a smoke charge, which is pretty good. The missile does a lot of damage as well. And it's really fast. Where is it? Let's see, 2500. That is awesome. Quick aim time, it goes hard. With the radar on, it can also target the missiles, which is really nice. And it also has this chain gun. The chain gun can also target missiles, and it can target everything else. So in a pinch, this thing annihilates infantry. As long as the infantry can't shoot at it, this thing will mince them. And at 1500 meters of range, you can actually outrange a lot of infantry dudes. I wouldn't go out of my way to try to use this to kill infantry. But if you run into a sniper or the enemy are dropping, Delta Force or combat engineers onto your front line and your vehicles have been bombed to the shithouse, these things will chew them up. And they get it's a really fast reload time and everything. It just seems to just fucking rack them away. Maybe it's because it's got 2 of them. But yeah, I've actually had it run out of ammo as its main problem when I'm using it to engage ground troops. So in a pinch, it does a really good job of that as well. The second best is the 9K332 Tor M2. I would upgrade this to get the 16 missiles. The reason why is because when it's unupgraded, which you might think, I'll just keep it at 8 because that's a lot. I'll just resupply it if I need to. But it gets 2 multi-targets when it's at 8. When you go up to 16, it gets 4. So this is significantly better at taking out cruise missiles and just getting flooded with anti-radiation missiles and all the rest of it. This is much better at dealing with that stuff. So definitely upgrade it up to the 200 cost. It still has good range, the 2200. It's not quite as far as the Panzer can get. And it's not quite as much penetration, not quite as much damage, but it's still pretty significant. The Tor can't hit infantry as well, and it doesn't have a smoke, so it can't really save itself if it gets into trouble. An honorable mention needs to be made to this little bad boy, the Duravitsia. It has that same 57mm that the Barbarous has, dealing the 120 pen with the 2.9 damage. It actually has a tiny bit of frontal armor. What this means is it doesn't have radar, so you can't get too far, but it has 1900 meters of range, which is pretty good to attack helicopters. It'll take it a while at that range to destroy a helicopter, but it can do it. But it means that it can also mince up IFVs and infantry like really well. It has good range on that cannon, so it has the flexibility, and it's cheap, so you can kind of just roll them around and use them for anything really, like whatever kind of comes in front of you, you can deal with it. Other than MBTs, it's a pretty good option. Next up, we have the biggest, widest tab that we possibly could fucking have, and we're just going to throw it all into indirect fire. This is our mortars, howitzers, artillery, and surface-launched cruise missiles, or ballistic missiles. These guys can shoot over buildings and terrain. They soften the targets for other units to destroy them. And they also primarily are used to destroy supplies, enemy air defense, and enemy indirect fire units, as well as HVTs. If none of that's available, then you just pepper the front line. They are vulnerable to everything, same as your air defense unit. These things normally don't even have a machine gun on them, so they just fall over to anything that shoots at them. And they're a HVT. The enemy will constantly try to counter battery these things, so you've got to keep them moving. Keep them on those short salvos to make sure they're not going down. So the number one option in the indirect fire for the Russians, I think, is the TOS. And if you haven't been fucked up by a TOS, then you probably haven't played enough games. It is really solid. It doesn't have the greatest range. 2,400 is pretty small. But this thing will devastate infantry. Upgrade it all the way, so it does, it does get that good range. It comes on a tank platform, so it's actually really hard to take out. So one of the downsides for indirect fire is normally that anything can shoot at them and they'll die. This thing can actually take a hit. It's actually very annoying to take out. Having the 24 rounds is insane, and the thermobaric ones just mean this thing will mince infantry. And it can just layer an area, like an entire capture point, plus the sides of it, and kill every infantry in there. Like, it's crazy how good this thing is. It's just very heavy on the resupply constantly, but it's just so effective at what it does. It nearly always trades. It nearly always secures you the point that you're trying to push, or the area you're trying to push with it. The second best is still within the tank or the guard tank brigade. It's the 2 S35 Koalitzia SV. Upgrade it all the way up to the extended range, brings it to 260 bucks. The reason why we upgrade it is because by fully upgrading it, not only do we get the better range, but we also get a dab of guided munitions as well. You get these, I'm not going to say the name, but you can guide them in. So it's one of the few, if not the only, long-range artillery piece that has guided munitions that the Russians get, which is invaluable. If you played the Iron Thunders over on the US, you know how good they are. This is very similar. And if you can't make use of the guided munition because you don't have a laser, you can just drop them on the HE rounds and you get plenty of them. You also get a little bit of smoke, so that means you don't have to bring, or you don't need to bring a dedicated smoke vehicle to do your pushes. You can kind of just use these for that as well. They're a nice little multi-purpose indirect fire unit with great range. Something that doesn't have great range, but is an honorable mention, is this little Tolpan. It is, it can do people dirty. Okay, keep it on the base model, the actual Tolpan. The reason why this is pretty unique and an honorable mention is, one, it's cheap. And two, it has insane rounds. 120 penetration with 18 damage, and you get a couple of guided ones, means that this thing can really devastate frontline, vehicles or infantry, because the damage is just so absurd for an indirect fire unit. And being guided means that, you're actually going to fucking land the shot. Normally, the downside with things that have good damage and good penetration is that the dispersion starts to increase. But when they're guided, you don't have that fucking drama. Compare this to the Molka, which is one of the harder hitting indirect fire pieces. The Tolpan shits on it. And with most of the other ones that have, let's go to the Koalitia, this is the normal spread you get, 75 and 12. The Tolpan absolutely minces frontline troops. It doesn't have the range, so it can't reach a lot of the really juicy targets, but it just fucks up the front line. If you haven't used it before, give it a splash, because it's awesome. Moving into our helicopter tab, the first thing is our attack helicopter. This is our anti-ground unit capability. It has air-to-ground missiles and or rockets. They quickly destroy reconnaissance units. They also destroy vehicles from long range using their missiles. And it destroys infantry using a combination of normally their chain guns or their autocannons, as well as some of the rockets that they can use. And these things are highly mobile, okay? They can just mince around the battlefield. They're one of the fastest units that can stick around. It doesn't have a fuel expenditure. So they're very good to quickly react to what's developing. Downside is that they're very vulnerable to MANPADs and SHORADs on the enemy team, and you need to watch out for them. Additionally, they can be swooped by aircraft if you lose air superiority. Some of the aircraft that have cannons or the 2,000 meter range missiles, they can come down and swoop you if you lose the air battle. So you got to make sure you have good air defense or good air superiority fighters out and about so you don't get swooped. So the best one I reckon is the Mi-28NM Mikulich. Yeah, it's really a preference between the S8 rockets and the S13. The S13 are better against armor, but you've already got rockets to deal with that, and you've already got missiles to deal with that. And when you combine the 30mm plus the S8 rockets, you really rip through infantry real quick. So I prefer the S8s. And this is the only Russian helicopter that gets the Lima missiles. These things are really good and can one-tap a lot of vehicles because they do 20 damage and 100 penetration, as well as having really good range at 2,000. These are super potent. One of the main downsides is that they're pretty micro intensive because they can target infantry. They do a good job against infantry as well, don't get me wrong. But most of the time, you want to save these missiles for vehicles if you can, because they're top attack, because they're 20 damage. Like, yeah, they do really good damage versus infantry, but you really want these for the vehicles, and you want to use your S8s and your chain gun for infantry. It has the awesome Russian armor value of 30, still has 15 health, and it also has the highest optic range for helicopters as well, being the 2400. Decent ECM as well, 1.25 stealth. It's a really fucking solid helicopter. The second best, I think, is the KA-52K Katran in the Coastal. I think this is a really good loadout. It gets 25% ECM, which is absolutely awesome when we compare it to our Mikulich. Okay, it gets 10 more ECM, which is really cool. Same stealth, same everything else. It just has a slightly worse rocket, being the Hermes. It's not a top attack thing, so it can get done depending on which side you're attacking from. That's the main drawback from it. But it does have more rockets, which means you're resupplying less. And an honorable mention also needs to go out to the KA-52 Alligator. It still has that 25% ECM, really good armor. I would prefer this loadout, put the rockets on it for infantry, the Vickers for the vehicles. And you can also multi-roll it and put some eaglers on it so it can protect itself from those pesky little fucking killer eggs that's going to try to get it. It does bump the cost up quite a fair bit, but if you're looking for an all-purpose one because you lack SHORAD or you lack your MANPADs and you just can't really deal with helicopters, this is a good thing to bolster your deck. So if you've got shitty options in those areas that I mentioned, you might want to bump up your helicopter to multi-roll it. Next up, we have our transport, which is our fast resupply, okay? It has the ability to carry troops and or supply. They are much faster than ground troops. However, the downside is that the LZ can be spotted easily if it's too close to the forward line of troops. This means that dropping off supplies can be rather risky unless you already have a vehicle there ready to move them as soon as you drop them down, which is a super viable strat. They're very vulnerable to MANPADs and SHORADs, as per every helicopter. And same, they can be swooped by aircraft if air superiority already is lost. These also have the HVT tag because unlike IFV or ground transports, when a transport helicopter goes down, nothing inside it lives. So they all die, the enemy gets the points for everything. So when these are spotted, they do cop a lot of heat with people trying to take them out. The best one, I think, is on the coastal. Once again, the Mi-38T. It has a good capacity. It has good transport. It has good cargo capacity and good troop capacity as well. Gets 10% ECM, which is really nice. It has 10 armor, which is whatever, but it has 18 hit points. And it's one of the few in the Russian fleet that has that 18. The reason why this is significant, as you can see on these other ones, 15 there, 15 there, 15, 15. I believe there's only, I think it's this one here, yeah, the big beefy boy is the only one that goes up to 20. Okay, what this means by having the 18 health, so a lot of the anti-helicopter missiles that come from helicopters or from MANPADs, they normally have that around that 7 to 8 to 9 damage mark. Normally 8, 7 to 8, which means for most of the troop transports that are 15, they're like a 2-shot. Whereas having that 18, you reach over that breakpoint that in combination with the ECM actually increases survivability a lot more than what it initially appears. The next one, and the Russians get a shit ton of these units, and they're all very, very similar, and they're all pretty bad, to be honest. But the next one that's actually pretty decent is the Mi-35M. This is the loadout I would have on it. I'd go down to the gun pods because gun pods plus the chain gun is enough to rinse infantry. And you should be able to get within that range safely because the reason why this one's here, can't drop any supply. However, 8 troops means that you can fly to those points that are inaccessible otherwise. So Basilisk Peninsula, the hotel capture point, the start of the game, people try to airdrop there all the time. If you go there in this thing, with this setup, you'll win that fight. Okay, the 20 armor, 15 health, that's really good. The 25% ECM is really good against defending from random shit that's going on. But you can also pack Eaglers. So when the other transports are coming there, being it the Ospreys or the Blackhawks or whatever it is, you can shoot them on the move. You're both dropping, but you're shooting them. And if you take them out first, you just get the island. And it's just a free win. This is the setup I would run with it. It's pretty much only good for that capture point in particular. Or if you're trying to battle the US on some of their helicopter openings, this is the one to battle them with. As they develop more and more maps, especially if they have isolated capture points, this thing can only, increase in popularity. It's such a good underrated unit, especially for that hotel point. Give it a go if you haven't. Moving into our air tab, the first thing is our air superiority fighter. It normally comes in 2 categories, either a long-range sniper or our dogfighter. The long-range sniper needs to have multiple missiles of 9,000 meters in range, whereas the dogfighters prefer to have as many of the 7,000 meter range missiles as possible. They have excellent optic distance, they're fast, they're agile, and their whole and sole job is to destroy anything that the enemy puts in the air. They're very reliant on ECM and flares for their survivability, which is a bit of a coin flip at times, unfortunately. And they also have fuel, which can be super annoying. Depending on how much fuel some of these things have, you might not get the chance to dance as much as you need to, and you might just have to commit, which can lead you into some bad situations, or retreat, sell your aircraft, and kind of lose the air war. The best of these, without a doubt, is the Su-57. The reason why is because it is the only Russian aircraft that has a stealth rating of 1.25. Everything else has 1. So that means it can get the drop on enemy fighters, except for US ones. There are a number of US planes that have a 1.75 stealth rating, which means you just get beaten out. This is one of the things I mentioned at the very start of the video, the main differences between Russia and US. So it is dangerous if you're going up against the US to try to fight the air battle, especially against the F-22s. They're going to spot you out before you spot them, unfortunately. And the first shot really matters in a lot of these. However, if you're playing in a quick match and you see your other allies are bringing out planes at the start, you can throw this into the mix, play yours just that little bit more back from the rest of your friends, let them do the dogfighting and take the hits. I'd use this loadout so you can snipe with 2 of your missiles. So come in, let it off, back out, stay at your beyond the 7,000 meter range, fire the second one, go in for the couple of medium hits to, finish them off. And then with the Su-57, you also get the luxury of it automatically brings 2 of these R-73s, so you can clean up helicopters if you win that air superiority. The next best is going to be a dogfighter. It is the MiG-29K for 310 bucks. Just put R-77s and as many of them as you can on it. It's a nice cheap vehicle, and having 8 of them is a pretty nice breakpoint. The more of a single type of missile you have, the more rapidly it will fire it off. So if you just have 2, there might be like 4 seconds in between them firing. But if you have 8, it's more like a second between them firing. So you can really ripple them off real quick. You got enough ECM to get by. 10%'s okay. You kind of expect this to go down, but it's definitely going to cause havoc when it's up. An honorable mention needs to be made to the Su-35S. As you'll see as we get through this air tab, you'll see that you can use the Su-57 for a lot of things, and its stealth rating helps in anything that it does. So if you're not using that for your main air superiority fighter, this thing can also fit the bill. There's a couple of little loadouts. I think this is probably the most cost efficient one that you can do. 20% ECM is really nice for the aircraft. But you get the 2 of the 9,000 meter ones, which is awesome. 4 of the medium, and then 2 for helicopters should you need them. Treat it very similar to the Su-57, where you fire off 1, you get out, you fire off the second, get into the mix and let off the 7,000 meter ones, and then clean up helicopters with the last. It does a pretty good job, very similar to the Su-57, and the main difference is just the stealth rating. Next up, we have our air-to-ground aircraft. These are our strikers, bombers, or cruise missile launchers. There's so many different preferences that comes down to your playstyle when it comes to these. I'll just point out what I think, in my opinion, is some of the better ones. They destroy ground-based HVTs. They're the main things you bring these out for. You want to trade them pretty efficiently. You don't want to just take out, a single infantry troop and lose a $300 plane. That's not worth it. So you really want to target those HVTs that are going to swing the battle. They're very reliant on ECMs and flares for their survivability, especially because these guys get in the mix more so than most other aircraft that you'll be utilizing. A big downside is that they can be destroyed before they release their payload, meaning that you don't get any value for it, which is super shitty when that happens. And they are vulnerable to enemy air defense as well as air superiority fighters. The best one, I think, is the Su-34 here. I'd use this loadout here. 6 clusters is kind of the ideal amount to get the job done. Sometimes, if you get unlucky on your spread, a tank can live with just a sliver of health by dropping 6. But that's also why we bring 2 incendiaries. They're a little bit cheaper than the other cluster option. And it means that you'll definitely, because the clusters will very, very likely mobility kill the tank. So it'll just die in the fire afterwards. As well, if you've got a couple of things in the area, or it's a good IFE, such as a Barbarous or one of the other more expensive ones, or maybe the IFE is just sitting next to the thing that you're bombing, this thing can kill the infantry inside it as well, because they just burn alive when they come out. So for 320 points, that also means that if you are taking out an MBT and you lose this plane, as long as you take out the MBT, you've probably traded evenly, which is a really good deal most of the time. If you prefer, because this thing is getting into the mix, it is like diving on the enemy, you could up it to have ECM, and it is a pretty substantial increase. 15% for $50 isn't bad, but by upping that cost, just keep in mind you need to trade more cost efficiently with it to make it worth it, because you're getting so close to the enemy air defense that you should be expecting to lose this thing regardless of what ECM is on it. Next up, the number 2 option, I believe, is the Su-57. Okay, we're back at it. Because of its stealth rating, it means it can get in there and get closer to dropping its payload than a lot of the other aircraft, which really, really helps. The stealth rating, like, I can't speak highly enough of it when it comes to aircraft. It has 20% ECM stock, which is fucking awesome. And it also has these 2,000 meter range ones, which means you can, if the strike goes well, you can take out, helicopters on your way out, or a fucking drone or something, and get out of there. For the air-to-ground role, I would prefer this loadout here. So first up, we have our smart bombs. These things can 1-tap, I think, just about all US tanks, and 2-tap a T-14 Barbarous. Especially in combination with being laser guided on. I'd probably drop both on an MBT just to make sure. But if you're attacking like backline threats, like air defense or indirect fire, one of these is plenty. Because you only need 2, bringing off the anti-radiation missiles as well and keeping it on hold fire as you come in means that when this does get spotted, which is going to be late because it has that stealth rating, when it gets spotted, then it will release its anti-radiation missiles. So instead of releasing them at 8,000, giving them the enemy plenty of time to intercept it, you might be able to get them off at like 4,000 meters, in which case they lack the reaction to get their missiles in the air, and you'll see that the anti-radiation missiles that come from the Su-57 are a lot more effective than those that don't have the stealth rating. Additionally to that, because the anti-radiation missiles are going in front of your aircraft, that means that the enemy air defense are going to target the anti-radiation missiles first, which kind of gives you another layer of protection on top of your stealth rating and on top of your ECM and your flares that will safely allow you to drop your smart bombs onto the HVT that you're targeting. This was the old best loadout that just got nerfed. It had cruise missiles, so you could do the same thing, except, you would never be anywhere near enemy air defense. You would just constantly refund this. They nerfed this down so it can't take out MBTs by itself. You need a 3rd missile, which makes it kind of shitty. But I think the smart bombs is a good change to make, so you can still take out those MBTs. And you still got the cover to do so. It does bring the cost down significantly. The last one I'm going to cover is I'm sure everyone's heard of it, the Coastal Tu-22M3. This thing on this loadout with the 3 KH-32 cruise missiles is just super nice. These missiles are awesome. They do a good amount of damage. They get a good flight speed. In the latest patch, these cruise missiles have been nerfed heavily due to like a couple of bug fixes and stuff, so they're not quite as pertinent as they have been. But as far as cruise missile launches go, this is probably the best one in the game. It always gets them off, and you get back home, and you get the refund, and it's all well and good. So if you're looking at cruise missile stuff, this is the one. Last category is our SEED, or suppression of enemy air defense. These are our anti-active radar units. They carry anti-radiation missiles, which we've already talked about a little bit. They destroy active radar units. The anti-radiation missiles won't work unless the radar is on. It forces the enemy radars to be turned off or they'll be destroyed, which in turn allows you to do air-to-ground strikes or paradrops or any other random shit you want to do in the air. These are kind of the things that enable that airplay. They're very vulnerable to air superiority fighters. They're not quite as vulnerable as other aircraft when it comes to air defense units, because these will target them with the anti-radiation thing. But if you do get too close, they can still be shot down by air defense units that don't have their radar turned on. If the enemy reacts in time and turns their radar off while your missile is in flight, the missile will just spud into the ground, which makes it pretty annoying if the enemy has enough attention that they can just flick the radar on and off to waste all your rounds. And if the enemy air defense net is already fully developed, these can have a hard time penetrating because the anti-radiation missiles can still be intercepted by SHORADs and air defense as long as their radars are on. So if they've built it up enough, and the whole team have, sometimes these have a really hard time getting through that net until you use some indirect to get rid of it. The best one, and I hate coming back to it every time, but it's just fucking straight facts. The best one is the Su-57. Because of its stealth rating, this means that you can put it on hold fire, like I said before, swing it around a flank where, you're more than likely not going to get spotted until you fly kind of horizontally to their back line. And as soon as you get spotted, which is going to be late because of the stealth rating, the anti-radiation missiles will fire off at a very close range and the enemy won't have time to react to them and won't be able to intercept them in time. So you'll just rack up the kills pretty easily with that strategy. The more traditional option is the Su-24MP. So it automatically comes with one, and you can put 2 other anti-radiation missiles on it, bringing the total cost to 220, which is really cheap for still a fast aircraft with afterburner should you need it, as well as having that 10% ECM is super nice. I have also seen people run these with a couple of these air-to-ground missiles. So you do your swoop and you let the anti-radiation try to provide that buffer and provide that distraction so you can get in and just take out, a tank or 2 really quick. And it's not bad for 260. So I'd say this is fine and this is fine as well. I think it depends on how many points you got in your deck and if you're willing to throw them one way or another. But anyway, that wraps it up for this video. If you don't know how to use any of these categories, you don't know how to employ them effectively, I have another video for that on the channel. I'll link it down in the description. I'll try to put a thing on the screen as well, so you can click that and see how it all works. And as well, keep in mind, these are just my opinion. I have played through every specialization numerous times, so I do have quite a range of experience with this. However, if there are little golden eggs that you've found that I haven't mentioned off, please let's bring them up in the comments. Let's talk about it. Let's find some cool shit and engage. Anyway, I'll see you on the next video. Peace.